Hey everybody, Patrick here of the Daily Ember with special guest today, Joshua Collins, who's running for Congress in Washington State. Joshua, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How's it going, Patrick?
It's going well, going well. So, Joshua, you want to tell us a little about yourself? We know, you're running on the Green New Deal, a lot of progressive platforms. So, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, I'm 25 years old, so if I win, I'd be the youngest member of Congress. I'm a truck driver. I've been a truck driver for about 5 years now, and if I win, I'd be the first truck driver in Congress.
There you go.
So I wouldn't be adding to the large amount of lawyers and business executives that are in Congress, which is mostly what makes up Congress. It's the number one is career politicians, and then business industry execs and people from the business industry, and then also lawyers, and then after that, teachers and other various things. So yeah, I'm running on a very progressive platform. I'm a very progressive person, so I'm a democratic socialist. I want to do things that empower workers. I want to do things that are like bold and radical to meet the actual demands of the people right now, and the needs of the working class right now. So I think in general, I'm working to replace someone who is just bought by corporations, and just he has no interest in serving the will of the people. He's not liked by either conservatives or progressives. And independents in general hate him as well. So he's just being propped up by the fact that we're a very safely blue district with very low voter turnout. And so I'm trying to actually replace this guy with someone who's actually going to fight, which is me. So
yeah. No, absolutely. And like you said, you support Medicare for all. And this man, I was looking up, he's taken, since being in office, around $500,000 from the healthcare industry. And he's, strongly opposes Medicare for all, from what I've researched.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's been pushed very hard on Medicare for all. There are a lot of organizations in Washington State, the Red Beret Group, which is a national organization, and then Whole Washington, which is a Washington State focused group that is just trying to get like a state-run Medicare for all system. And they have been in his office countless times. I've been in his office over numerous things, including the federal jobs guarantee, the Green New Deal. This guy does not move on any of it. He doesn't just he's not just not doing anything for our goals. He's actually actively opposing them. And he's going out, campaigning for, right-wing Republicans who are against, women's right to choose, who want to privatize every industry they can get their hands on. And, he's for a Democrat, he's one of the most conservative ones, and he's supporting some of the most conservative candidates on the local level. So.
Absolutely. So that's good to see you running out there to work and represent the working class, because, like you were saying, in Congress and representation, there's not too many people fighting for the working class, as we come to know.
Right.
And again, Medicare for all is supported across the whole country at an overwhelming level. So to see this guy still running against it at such a strong level, it's kind of like, are you trying to lose? So
right. He's just begging for a challenger, and he hasn't taken anyone seriously up until now. So I don't even know if they'll take me seriously, but I'm coming at him, and he's underestimating me will be the biggest mistake they'll ever make, is what I'm saying.
And that's the mindset to go at it with, so that's good. There's another thing. I was looking on your platform. I haven't seen this worded this way before, taxing automation to assist the workers. I really like that. Would you like to talk about that some more? Maybe explain what you're talking about?
Yeah, right. So because I'm a truck driver, I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I also get asked about it very frequently. It's such a big issue right now that is getting completely ignored by Democrats and Republicans in Congress. Automation is coming for our jobs, and that's just not just truck drivers. It's, people in the trucking industry. It's people who are low-level coders, retail workers, car salesmen. I mean, just anything you can imagine. Like, there is a website or a robot working like that is bound to replace your job. For a lot of jobs. I'm talking tens of millions, close to 100 million jobs in this country. And the reality is no one in Congress has a plan for it. And I am coming forth with an actual plan to deal with that. A lot of the progressive policies that we have already deal with some of the issues with automation. But ultimately, I think what we need to do is ensure that as these companies are replacing workers with, machines and, websites that kind of cut out the worker entirely, we need to make sure the workers are benefiting from it, and it's not just funneling more and more of the country's wealth and resources into the hands of a very small number of people.
Exactly.
So that means things like, a federal jobs guarantee by taxing the companies who are automating, things like truck driving, things like warehouse, automated forklifts, things like that, to guarantee that those workers have jobs available for them. Increasing wages so that people don't have to work 60 and 70 hours a week to survive. That also frees up work that can be done by other workers and will increase the number of jobs in this country. I mean, we could end the unemployment issue in this country immediately if we just reduce the number of hours worked on average by workers, because that would free up a lot of labor that needs to be done by someone, right? And that opens up jobs for the unemployed. Yeah. And the only reason we don't do that in trucking, in nursing, in warehousing is because, employers don't want to raise wages. And wages just aren't keeping up with the productivity. They aren't keeping up with the demand of workers. And at this point, the wage a worker is paid it's not based on how much that worker is valued or how much value they're putting into the company. It's based on what is the lowest amount a company can get someone to work for them for. And they don't care about how long you stay with them. They just want you, for example, a lot of truck drivers, they move from job to job, nurses as well. These are two of the biggest jobs in our country, right? And, they will work for somewhere for 9 months, but in order to get a raise, they got to go switch jobs, which means they got to go 3 months without health insurance, which means they got to, deal with all of that hassle and, reset their deductible for their health insurance. And it's not working for the average American to, just work in any industry. Because you can look at, things like dock workers, people who load and unload trucks. I mean, they're dealing with the same thing. They're working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and they're still making $15 an hour, which is what they made, 10, 20 years ago. So.
Yeah, it's just stagnant wages. It's something that hasn't across the board. That's an issue.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, no, that's a great way. I've never thought of it that way with taxing automation, how you mentioned it. So I guess another question is, do you support a UBI system as well?
I think the concept of a universal basic income sounds good. It would need to be something that's much more complex than I think what Andrew Yang's idea is.
I agree.
The whole point of a universal basic income is to ensure that the people who need it the most are at least getting a baseline income. But under his system, there is no there's nothing to keep it from just completely subtracting from someone's social security or disability payments.
Yeah.
So I feel like that system doesn't help the people who are struggling the most in this country. And that's something that I would address if I were to be involved in the planning of a universal basic income. But I mean, the idea, I do like the idea of, redistributing wealth to the working class. So I do like that concept. I just want it to be something that is more fair and across the board, I guess.
No,
more
completely
universal.
Understandable. I agree, because I'm just glad, at least we have somebody now that's bringing it to the debate stage that's going to talk about it, because before that wasn't an idea anyone was willing to discuss. So yeah, I agree. If it's something more broad and specific, then that's definitely something I could get behind. But yeah, his self has some holes in it.
Yeah, exactly. Just some holes. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to explain it.
Yeah. And then I guess next up here, you support tuition-free college and trade schools as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And when I talk about free education, right, this is something that addresses a lot of issues that we're dealing with in this country, and that is, the fact that we have a shortage of teachers, we have a shortage of nurses, and a lot of other jobs that require an education. The biggest reason to not become a teacher right now is because it costs, tens, of thousands of dollars to become a teacher. The
mhm.
same thing with nursing, is costs tens of thousands of dollars to become a nurse. I think we should completely get rid of that and then make it so that there are, more people in those industries available, especially. That also goes to like the trades as well. I think, we have a shortage of blue collar workers in this country, and that kind of goes to the fact that people just don't know how to get into it. How many people are working right now as cashiers that wish they could be, like a union electrician, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of them, and that's the kind of thing we should talk about, like how people, like if you want to go and do a different job, and you have the capability of actually learning that job, you should be able to, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm coming from.
No, absolutely. Again, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people out there that could learn a trade and, learn it to do something not like the everyday job, like you're saying, where you're
Right.
like, do I have to keep doing this, the same repetitive stuff and not challenging yourself? I think I like that because not too many people nowadays are, talking about going to trade schools. Unions are under attack across the country still.
Right. Yeah.
So it's very important to talk about that. And leading into that, you also support eliminating student debt, which overwhelmingly
Yes.
supported across the
Right.
country.
Yeah. So my view on student debt is, I mean, we have this predatory system that is taking advantage of people wanting to better their lives. And it disproportionately affects, poor and minority people. It's something that we're completely ignoring, that it is targeting the working class, and it's targeting people of color, and politicians who are funded by the banks that are profiting off of it, who are cozy with like the entire system. They're not addressing it and the scale that needs to be addressed, in my opinion, because all of this debt was accrued under a predatory system. It should just
Mhm.
be wiped away, and we should start fresh with a new system where anyone of any age, of any race, from any part of the country can go and get a quality education in whatever trade or field that they need to get one, for free, and get a living stipend as well while they're doing that, so that we end the system of getting $1 trillion of student debt just because we won't take care of people who want to better themselves.
Yes. No, that's great.
Yeah.
So, what was that? Was that this year then? Wasn't that Betsy DeVos? They declined like 95% of the student debt forgiveness like applications that were put in. Was that this year?
Actually, a lot of that's actually been happening since the very beginning.
No.
There, even George Bush's program and Obama's program,
Yeah.
they were very similar. They try to come up with this program that only erases some of the debt if you get these certain circumstances. But then you have people who are, that have been just basically taken advantage of and put under a mountain of debt by this predatory system, who are still like going to be dealing with that debt because whatever qualifiers we're adding, they just don't meet them. And in my opinion, there is no amount of there's no form of student debt in this country that wasn't accrued from like basically a scam of a system.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we should blanket erase all of it, and that means no matter what you went to school to become, includes truck drivers, costs anywhere between $3,000 to $15,000 to become a truck driver. That should be erased as well, and that's across the board, no matter what you went to school to become. Yeah, that
Yeah.
also addresses why teachers are struggling so much right now. I think we should have a minimum pay for teachers of $60,000 federally, and that way we can ensure that no matter where a teacher is, they're getting a decent living. But
Yep.
also, a lot of teachers, part of the reason they're struggling is because they have $300, $500, $800 worth of student loans that they have to pay every month. And for someone like that, even if you're making 60 grand and you're paying $800 a month for your student loans, like you can't really live off of that. And that's why we have this weird system where students are like, pulling together money to buy their parents or buy their student or their teacher like a used car, because the teacher can't afford a car to get to work, or their healthcare. Yeah. And that's something I think we need to completely end. I think, we need to value teachers in this country. You can see in countries like Finland and other top performing countries for education, teachers are much more well respected. And we also need to reform our entire education system, but that's we're going to have a plan for that laid out very soon.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that as well.
Cool.
Oh man, I had something to say, but it just slipped my mind at the end there. Well, it'll come back to me. I'll come back to it if it pops back up. But what next year? I also had the criminal justice reform was up here as well. Something very needed. So I'm assuming you support ending the use of private prisons.
Yes, I support ending private prisons entirely. I also would like to completely, destroy and reform our entire system. We have a prison system that is not focused at all on corrections and is almost entirely focused on the punitive aspect. Most people that are in prison today don't even belong in prison. I think for low-level offenders and non-violent drug offenders, they should not only be released from prison, but they should be paid reparations for the time that has been stolen from them by our country.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess in that sense. So also, how do you feel about how the police out there? Do you guys have a very militarized police force out in your area, or is that not so much affected out by you?
It's like a lot of police departments in the country. There are giant problems. It's better than it was 10, 20 years ago. I would say most of the country is better than it was 10 to 20 years ago, but there are still giant issues. The accountability is the biggest thing that's just not there. When a cop does something blatantly wrong, they're not held accountable, and that is something that I think we do need to address. And in whatever way we can address that on a federal level, I would like to.
All right, great. Well then, how about what did we tackle? We tackled a little bit about the living wage, I think, under automation, didn't we? Or no, we didn't. Let's tackle that guy. Let's tackle into him. So what would you see as a living wage currently with, the rate of inflation we have? Because we see many states pushing, the Fight for 15 movement right now. Many people say it could be 20, 25 in that range as well. So what are your ideals?
Well, right now, I live in the state with the highest minimum wage in the country. Aside from DC, there is no actual state with a higher minimum wage, and it's $13.50 in Washington State. So we're only $1.50 away from $15. Before they passed this, people were saying it's going to bankrupt everything. It's going to crush every business in existence. Nobody's going to have jobs. It's going to be, you're going to see a lot of issues caused by it. Everyone's going to go out of business. That didn't happen. When it comes to small businesses, the ones who were already paying their workers a decent wage, they did very well. They thrived under it. The ones where the owner was just happened to own a business, they didn't actually help with it, and they were depending on the workers to do all the work for them. Those ones tend to not do so well under that system, and they were replaced by small business owners that could actually do well and take care of their workers. The biggest issue we have seen with small businesses, of course, is Amazon actually putting people out of business. If you sell things that then you can see how Amazon is actually taking away a ton of business just by their existence, right? What I think we need to do with the minimum wage on a federal level is incrementally increase it every single year until it is above the cost of living. That is what we've done in Washington State, and I think that's what we should do on a federal level. Based on what how inflation has moved throughout time, the minimum wage should be well over 20 to 25 bucks an hour right now. And because we are going sometimes over a decade without increasing the minimum wage, and then when we do increase it, it's like $1 or $2. We're not seeing the minimum wage keep up with inflation. My first job paid $7.25 an hour, and that was in Nevada State. There, the minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. Oof. You can still get paid $7.25 an hour in much of the country, and that was over 10 years ago now. And you could still get paid that amount. It's insanity. No one can survive on that. It should be. It's criminal to pay that low of a wage, and I think very obviously we should immediately increase the wage to well over $10 an hour on the first year, and then keep on a few bucks every year. And then, we can slow it down when it gets to a more reasonable wage rate. But ultimately, I think we need to catch it up and have it somewhere over 20, 25 bucks an hour.
All right. I agree with this. And I like how you mentioned Amazon also, because that's something I talk about with my followers. Amazon it sweeps in, it takes these jobs also from these local mom and pop shops, and just, the mom and pop shops are the backbones of these communities. And when you take those out of the communities, then the communities start to fall apart and they start to struggle. And Amazon, their jobs aren't permanent jobs they bring. People don't stay at those jobs. Yeah. People work till they pay off whatever they debt they needed the job for real fast, or till they get burnt out working the job. But yeah, the Amazon warehouses here, we have like 3 or 4 now. I think we just built one out by me. So they're popping up like crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's this thing I call the Walmartification of America. Walmart was the first company that really did this. They go into communities. They build a giant store that kind of covers everything. They promise to provide a bunch of jobs that usually take subsidies in order to build in the communities, and they pay minimum wage. And because they don't need to make a profit, they can charge very low prices and essentially put everyone out of business in that community, and swallow up whatever economy was existing there. You saw this especially in the Midwest and in rural areas, even in Washington State, where Walmart comes in, and a few years later, Walmart's the only one left. Amazon is doing something very similar. Amazon, because they don't need to make a profit, no one can compete with them. No one can compete with someone who goes into debt for 14 years and still to this day is in the red. They didn't make more than they lost until their 15th year in business. So that kind of like predatory system is something that no one can compete with. No small business. If you're selling trinkets, if you're selling like little electronics, if you're selling phone cases, tools, whatever, and you have to compete with Amazon, who will literally lose money to deliver something directly to someone's door. Well, no one's going to come into your store when they can just buy it for cheaper online and it gets delivered to them. And I think that's something that we have to acknowledge, that Amazon basically got their wealth by losing money forever and swallowing up entire industries, and it has destroyed the main street of a lot of cities, including mine, which is Olympia.
Well, and what have you seen? I think it was 2 days ago. Amazon announced it was trying to buy Boost Mobile from T-Mobile and Sprint. So now they're trying to acquire a whole nother field. Yeah, So I guess you'd also be in favor of breaking up monopolies.
Yeah, of course, definitely. I think it's weird that my cell phone company also is trying to run a bank as well. So I don't know if you know that, but T-Mobile has banking services now. Because
I did not know this.
Yeah, so I mean they're trying to do everything. And it's ridiculous when eventually you're going to have one company that owns your whole life, and it's going to be just 3 companies in America, and everyone else is.
So the same people that can sell your data information to third parties can also have your banking information, is what you're telling me with T-Mobile. Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and personally, I think that should be illegal. I don't think we should have a system where these giant companies are doing 9 things at once, and it also makes it so to where something like Amazon can't really. It gives them these advantages because they can lose money in one part of their business while making money in another part, so
True.
that they can continue like swallowing up an industry until everyone is just pushed out. The idea of starting up your own smaller carrier, you're talking about billions of dollars right now. You just can't do it. And so that's something that I think we need to put an end to. And that just requires just straight up breaking up large businesses.
Good. Well, that's good to hear because, that's something that's also crippling our economy and the jobs is all these monopolies swallowing things up.
Right.
So here's another thing I liked in your wording on your platform here, transition from a war economy to a peace economy. So would you like to explain more what you meant by that?
Yeah. So my idea of transitioning from a war economy to a peace economy, so the way I would start that is we have a war economy today. That's a huge problem. And what I mean by a war economy is some of our biggest exports are things like bombs. And then like one of our biggest industries is the oil industry. And that is all based on the system where we have to go and like involve ourselves in these other countries because otherwise some of our biggest industries die out. And those industries aren't necessarily helping us. They're helping very wealthy people, and they're very small job creators. There aren't a ton of jobs for building bombs and working in the oil industry. A lot of those jobs are going away. A lot of them have been automated away, and so we're talking about like ending the system where like a lot of our economy is propped up by literal war for oil, and investing in things like building solar panels, like building green energy trucks, building other green energy technology, and making that one of our top exports. We could have right now, within a couple years, we could transition to where we are the biggest producer of solar panels, of wind, windmills, wind turbines, windmills. We can actually become the leader in the world for that, and it would only take a little bit of investment. We would have to end the oil subsidies and stop investing a giant chunk of our national budget into bombs, and actually put our troops to work in our country, building the infrastructure so that we as a nation can actually use the things that we're producing. We're one of the biggest consumers in the world, and if we build the solar panels, if we build the windmills, if we build electric cars and hydrogen powered trucks, we're going to be the top purchaser. So it would automatically benefit us because we would be producing something here that we would be using. And then we can also export it to the rest of the world because the rest of the world does like the things that we make.
And especially now with the hop on for renewable energy sources as well. So that just helps even more. It's funny because if we want to do that also, as we were talking about, if we need to get money out of politics because we know these arms contractors and dealers are also heavily involved in lobbying. I did a report on a podcast earlier this year about how there was a Raytheon lobbyist at the table with Mike Pompeo when discussing if we should be involved in the Yemen crisis. And the only reason that got passed at the time was because the Raytheon lobbyist was arguing that it might hurt future sales. Not might get used to bomb innocent civilians or anything. No, it might hurt future sales. So
I mean that's like the system we have in Washington where if everything's all tied together, people like the guy I'm running against, they take millions, hundreds of thousands from every industry and then pretend that it doesn't influence them. I'm running against a guy who nonstop rails against Trump and Russia. And then when Trump wants this giant military budget that the military didn't even ask for. He's all for it. And it's because he doesn't get his money from us. He gets his money from Boeing and Raytheon and the others. So when it comes to where his interests and his loyalties lie, it's obviously with his donors, which are the military industrial complex. So that's something that we need to end. We also need to end the system where someone who is in office can then, once they are out of office, they become a lobbyist. I know that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is talking about that right now. Joe Crowley, as soon as he was out of office, he just became a lobbyist, and he works to fundraise with my opponent. And that's something that I think is just ridiculous. He's immediately going to taking money instead of through donations directly as a paycheck from the corporations he was supposedly supposed to police as a member of Congress. And I don't think that's something that my opponent would support, because what else is he supposed to do when he gets out of office when I defeat him?
Of course. Yeah. That's exactly where most of these guys will roll over to afterwards. Like here in Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, he didn't go over to a lobbying position, but now he's got an editorial position on The Atlantic, and he's a commentator on ABC News. For what, we don't know. He didn't really accomplish anything, as anybody knows, but
it sounds like for him, he was probably propped up by the media quite a bit, and they wanted to return the favor with a decent paying job. So
but here, let's talk about your opponent a little more. So one of the things I was noted while looking up about him, he voted to weaken some financial regulations. What are your thoughts on that one when he's doing this?
Well, some of his top donors are, the banking industry. JP Morgan is actually one of his top donors. So personally, I don't think this guy should be anywhere near financial regulations when he's clearly taking checks from the financial industry. So that's something that I obviously wouldn't do. And I would oppose anything to deregulate the banking industry. We should be going the opposite way and actually cracking down on them and breaking them up.
Exactly. And he also here voted to ease restrictions on payday lenders. I think that was earlier this year, right, with PayGo?
Yeah, right. That doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, pretty much anything this guy votes on, he's going to vote with the banks and with the financial industry. Securities and investments are, so the securities investments are one of his top donors as well. And this is something that his own constituents are opposing. There aren't a bunch of activists jumping behind him because they're like excited that he's going to deregulate the banking industry. He's doing this despite the fact that his constituents oppose it, because he really doesn't feel like he's threatened. He feels like he can pretty much get away with anything, which is why he's also campaigning with Republicans.
Which that's one of those blue no matter who things, right? I guess right. It's a great example.
Exactly.
What another thing? Climate change, such a hot topic right now. You're working for something like a Green New Deal, while he was working to speed up the imports of natural gas.
Right.
What do you have to say with that one?
He likes to pretend that he's good on the environment. He will, I don't know if you follow his Twitter much, but they will ever so often post about the problems that we're dealing with our environment. But in reality, he's taking checks directly from the companies, the corporations that are causing those issues. And so that is the giant hypocrisy and the type of corruption that we need to get rid of. He's not only gonna be complacent and not do anything when we're talking about climate change. He's actually going to do things that contribute to it, and he currently is and has been much of his career. So I think that's why he needs to go. He's not only just going to stand in the way and stand around with his hands in his pockets, but he's actually going to actively do damage to our environment. And for someone, who's young, this is a concern for me because, if I have kids, I don't want to bring kids into like a dying world. And so I really think someone like Dennis Heck, especially in the Democratic Party, should be opposed because, we're generally thinking like, we have a Democrat in office, we're good, right? But in reality, we're not. We have someone who is okay with poisoning the environment, who is okay with, having dirty water, and, actually exacerbating climate change. So I think that's why we need to get this guy out of office.
Absolutely. We need someone that's going to actually walk the walk and not just talk it on Twitter. So
right.
I think we're hitting the end of this interview here. I think I got one more for you. I was just curious then, how do you plan to build your movement on the ground to beat him in the long run, and even afterwards, if say if you weren't to, do you plan on you still moving forward with the movement on the ground afterwards, either way?
Yeah. So we're not actually running to like push him left. We're not trying to influence him or send a message. We're running to actually defeat him. He's got to go. He's been in politics for over 40 years. He's not doing anything. He's not doing anything to help the movement, to help workers, to help improve our environment, increase our wages, improve our education system. He's not doing anything good, and he's actually a net negative sitting in Congress. We are working with unions. We're working with people on universities, and a lot of activist organizations, and we're building basically the MLK coalition. We're going to be working with people who want racial justice, who want wage increases, who want a better working conditions and living conditions. And that is the way we plan to do this, is by a grassroots movement with a coalition of people who have a vested interest in getting this guy out of office and getting someone who actually represents their interests into office.
Well, awesome, Joshua. I look forward to watching your campaign and watching you hopefully defeat him in the long run. Anybody that's watching this or that ends up watching this, make sure to check out all of his information down below. It's got his links to his website where he can donate, his Twitter, his Instagram, all down there. Joshua, do you have any events or anything coming up that you'd like to talk about before we go?
We don't have any events, but we are trying to fundraise for one right now. So, if people donate and we get enough money, we can, hold a bigger volunteer event and try to live stream everything and keep it all public.
So yeah. Awesome. Well, you heard that. Donate down below. So, well, Joshua, thanks for coming. It's been great having you. It's been good talking, and I'm wishing you luck.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a good one.